Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Uh, Welcome back, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Can you all hear me? Just give me thumbs up. If you can hear me, thumbs up. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right. At least Clayton can't connect to the audio. Never mind, he's got it. Okay, very good. Hope everyone's doing okay. We are now, I guess, a few more people are coming in late. Let you all in. Please sign in to the attendance. The iClicker will be on in now. Okay. Okay, so you should be able to sign into the attendance right now. I'll do a poll question in a minute to test that out. Are there any questions first? Okay. I ask all of you please to put your last name, comma, first. Most of you did. Some of you didn't. If you didn't, you can actually rename yourself. If you click under the options of rename under your name, you can actually change what you're called. So if you do that, I'll be able to go through our citation a lot easier than otherwise. Okay, thank you. All right. Any questions before we get started? So funny, I see people tapping their screens. This is hilarious. Okay. Any questions before we get started? No? All right. Let me try the poll question, see if I can make this actually work correctly. I tried it the other day and it didn't work well. iCloud. Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay. Sorry. I do the screen share now. Okay. So this question should show up on your iClicker app. I think that's the better way of doing it. That way we can keep everything else stable. Okay, property one. Resume. Okay. Okay, here we go. All right. Multiple choice question. True or false? Property inherited by a husband during marriage is marital property. True or false? Again, property inherited by a husband during marriage is marital property. True or false? Okay, I see about 50 of you put the answer in, so it looks like this thing's working well enough. Okay. All right, another few seconds. And whoever is next up in the roster, you can put yourself off mute, and I'll call on you in a second. All right, that's good. Who's up next? Who is that? Garrett? Okay, Garrett, thank you. So, Garrett, let me ask you a question first off. Oh, God, Corona, you're funny. I guess we can be sense of humor now. Better. What is marital property? What does that phrase mean, marital property?
Any assets or wealth you and your partner accumulated while y'all are married.
Okay, so Garrett, let me ask you a follow-up. During the marriage, can one spouse demand of the other spouse to divide up marital property?
Can they demand them to divide it up?
Yeah.
You mean like just like in the middle of it, or
yeah? No. During the marriage, they're happily married, they're in love, they're living a life. Could one spouse go to court and ask the other spouse to divide up property?
I would say no, because they mutually own it together.
So when does marital property actually matter? When do the courts actually get involved?
Uh, Death or divorce.
Exactly right. Very good. Thank you, Garrett. So this is an important point for your notes to make clear. While a couple is married, marital property is not very important, right? Generally, one spouse can't go to court and demand from the other spouse some sort of division of assets. There are rare cases where there might be spousal abuse or neglect where you can have a court intervene, but at that point, you're almost always talking about a divorce. Courts aren't going to keep a person in an abusive marriage, if you know what I'm saying, right? It's rare. The only time when the phrase marital property matters is in cases of death or divorce. Both have their own difficulties. When a person dies, right, when a spouse dies, you might have to divide the property up. The wife gets some, the kids get some, the grandkids get some, etc. With divorce, it's a different set of complications because not only are you dividing up marital property, there may be awards of spousal support, what you may have known as alimony. We don't use that word anymore. We don't call it alimony. We call it spousal support because historically, alimony just meant for the wife, whereas spousal support means, at least in theory, that both spouses can claim some sort of money that's paid on a regular basis. But my question for the poll was more specific. Let's see, Garrett, who's...
Should be me, I think.
Is that Blake?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Blake, thank you so much. So Blake, my question for you was, is property that's inherited considered marital property?
I think during the marriage, absent death or divorce, I think it is property, marital property.
Oh, hold on, actually, I just said Garrett Singleton, right?
Yeah.
So, Blake, I think you come before him, actually.
Oh.
Well, I'll call on you anyway, but Jenny's on deck. She's like, yes. But you're already here, so what's your background? What is that?
Stuart has been guessing correctly. He hasn't typed an answer to me yet. This is actually the Amundsen Scott South Pole Weather Station in Antarctica.
I don't know if they have any corona this. Maybe that's a safe place to be. Anyway, so your answer here is you're saying that property that's inherited is not marital property. I'm sorry, is marital property. That was your answer?
Yes, I'm not super confident.
Well,
I think so.
Let me put it this way. When a husband and wife are living together, right, Blake?
Mm-hmm.
And, one spouse earns some money. Is that going to be considered marital property?
Yes.
Why? Why would we, even though only one spouse is working, we say that the money received could be marital property?
Because in marriage, the two people are now one entity, like a corporation. So anything that one spouse or the other gets belongs to that corporation.
You're right, Blake, but why? Why would, let's say the wife is working and the husband's at home. Why would the husband have a claim to something the wife's getting? What's the argument?
So this would be, okay, so marital property, we have the English system and the continental system. So we've got communal property.
Well, no, forget communal property. Just as a general, think of the case we have today from Colorado, right? Where the wife was working, the husband was going to school. What's the wife's claim why she should get anything from the husband? What's the argument?
Because they support each other.
They support each other, right? Good. That's the general reason why marital property exists. Even though only one spouse is working, the other spouse provides some sort of support, whether it's helping around the house, helping with the kids, providing goodwill, saying, honey, you can do it, right? These sorts of things. Marital property is designed to reward the spouses who work together for a common enterprise, for a common good. And in this case, the common good is success of the household. All right. So Jenny, I think you're next. You got a brief reprieve. Are you here, Jenny?
I'm here. Hey, I'm sorry if the audio is deep fried. I'm having to sit outside.
Oh, that's all right. Here you go. Thank you. So Jenny, let me ask you a question. If you have a husband and wife, and the husband inherits some property from, say, his dead grandfather, right? Did the other spouse have any role in receiving that inheritance?
No, I would have answered false to
Okay.
the
Why do you think the answer is false here?
because in this case the wife didn't have anything to do with the inheritance.
Exactly. So the answer here is false. Let's see how you guys voted. Okay, about 68% of you put false. About 32% of you put true. Okay, let me explain why the answer is false. I think Jenny said it quite well. When you have marital property, we presume that the husband and wife support each other. So if the husband has a job or the wife has a job, the other spouse takes a role in that. But inheritances are treated differently because inheritances are in no part responsible for the other spouse. The spouse did nothing. The money came because someone died. The same argument applies to certain types of gifts, right? If a spouse receives some sort of gift during marriage, those may be exempt as well. This argument applies even more broadly. What about gifts given before marriage? Gifts given before marriage are not marital property because the other spouse has nothing to do with it. The challenge for today's class, I see I have a couple hands up, Chance and Dylan. The challenge for today's class is deciding, is something marital property? Is a amount of money marital property? Is a piece of land marital property? Is some sort of personal property, like a ring or maybe like a dog? This is a huge issue in divorces, who gets the dog, right? In most states, dogs are considered chattels. They're personal property the same way a car would be. I know people don't like that answer, but it's true. And then we get to slightly more complicated situations like a degree, a business degree, right? Is the increased earning potential from having a business degree marital property? Let's say one spouse helped another spouse build his business, right? Maybe we'll have a case where you have a wife who's an opera singer and the husband was a voice coach. And the husband quit his job and trained the wife for years and became this famous opera singer, and then they got divorced. So was the fact that the husband quit his job to train the wife, could that be considered part of the marital property? We did a case last week or last class where a wife took care of her sick husband. And the court said, well, that's what you're expected to do. That's not anything special. So the challenge, you're saying, what is marital property and what is simply outside that category? All right, Chance, you're the first one up with your hand. Yes, sir, you're on.
I think Dylan had it first, but no big deal. You said inheritance was not in furtherance of the relationship, therefore it is not marital property. If you have an inheritance or a will, I guess there might be some differentiation between the two, where the condition was if the child got married, I'm leaving my house to them with the idea that because they're married, I want them to have property to further their marriage, or is that a next kind of semester question?
Someone always asks this question. There are going to be circumstances where an inheritance is conditioned on being married, for example, right? I'll give you an inheritance if my grandson gets married. Even in those cases where the inheritance is conditioned on marriage, the inheritance is not marital property. This is a bright line rule. Money that's inherited is considered separate. Did that answer your question, Chance? All right, Dylan, I think your hand's up also.
So the book says that in some states, inheritance is considered marital property. So are you teaching us the majority rule, or has that been abolished?
I think that might be kind of a minority. As a general matter, when you inherit property in a marriage, right? When you inherit property as part of a marriage, that's considered separate. Okay. Thank you, Dylan. Now, someone always asks me, I hate this question. What happens if people are married who are related? Right? I'm sure you were thinking that. What if, cousins are married and they both inherit? I think they would inherit it as separate. Yeah, I know you're smacking your heads. I think they would inherit it as as separate property. Although, anyway, you're welcome. But I every couple semesters, someone asked me that question. I was sort of grateful you didn't. But I do get that one every now and then. All right. Yeah. Look. I mean, you could have it's not insane, right? In most states, you can have second or third cousins, who are married legally, and it's entirely feasible that they get the same inheritance, right, from the same dead person. Although it would be for each person. Anyway, I'm done. Yes. The chat is lighting up. Any questions on that? As a general matter, inheritances are beyond the scope of the of marital property. You don't have to worry about it. All right, you're welcome. Yeah, it happens. It happens. Okay. All right. So let's start today's class. So hold on. Juitza just put a question. Juitza, just so you know, you're typing a private chat that only I can see. If you say send chat to everyone else can see it. I'm just going to copy your message to everyone so everyone can see it. And she wrote, Professor, could you address the issue from last class, the difference between common law English and common law American? Okay, yes. Let me clarify an issue from last class. The phrase common law has a lot of meanings in this topic. So let me discuss the first meaning. The first meaning of common law is what is the restatement first position, right? What is the traditional position? In that sense, common law is distinguished from modern law, right? You have the common law, which is like the first restatement, and the modern law, which is like the restatement third, right? Okay. That's usually how I use the word common law. But in the context of marital property, there's a second meaning. And this, make sure you clear up in your notes. Texas has what's called community marital property. Community marital property, which we'll study next week. With community marital property, the husband and wife share the property in a communal fashion, right? That's community marital property. That's what's known as the continental approach, right? From France and from Spain and from Italy, community property. But then there's a system that came from England, right? Most of the states in the United States follow the English model, right? What complicates things is how we call the English model. We describe the English model as the common law marital property system. One more time. The stuff from Spain and France is called community property, community marital property. The stuff from England is called common law marital property. Why does this get confusing? Because within the English system, you have some old rules and you have new rules. You can have modern common law property rules, or you can have, ready for it, common law marital property. I'm sorry, I know I just blew your minds, right? Even within let's just use New York as an example, right? New York has the common law or the British system property. New York can have modern rules, which is modern common law, or the old-fashioned rules, which is common law. I know, the terminology is boggling. If I could make it easier and just call it the English rule, I would, but no one calls it the English rule. They call it the common law property system. So you will actually have within New York some common law rules and modern rules within a common law state. It's a tongue twister, I know. There it is. Does that, Juiz, does that answer your question? Does that make some sense? I almost wish I didn't have to explain this, but it is a little confusing. Yes, ma'am. Are you here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have questions. What does California follow? What does Texas follow? Texas and California are influenced by the Spanish tradition, right? Most of the American Southwest follows the continental approach, which we call community property. And those are the ones you probably have to know more than any others, but you also know community property. Okay. Other questions? All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So let's move on. The topic of today is primarily divorce. Death and divorce are treated differently. The death, in some regards, is easier, and you'll take a class in wills and trusts next year, which goes into some more depth. Today, my focus is on divorce. Divorce is common. It's fairly recent that divorce became this frequent. In some countries in Europe, divorce was only legalized in the last couple of decades. In Italy, divorce wasn't legalized until 1970. In Spain, 1980. Some of you may have thought of going to Malta. Nope. Anyway, Malta, 2011. So divorce historically wasn't allowed. Generally, divorce was only permitted in cases of abuse or serious neglect. But it wasn't what you might just have a falling out, as they say. In the United States today, half of first marriages end in divorce. If you get married a second time, the divorce rate's 67%. Is third time the charm? No. The divorce rate for the third time is about 75%. And these numbers vary depending which study you look at, but you have these sorts of issues. Okay. A couple of you are commenting on the connection. Let me address this. Right now, the entire United States is on their computers, right? All these people working from home. And internet infrastructure was not built for this. It wasn't. One thing I'd recommend you consider is if you have a hotspot on your phone, use your hotspot. Usually I wouldn't recommend that because you have bandwidth limits. But at least Verizon and AT&T have basically waived bandwidth limits this month. So if you can connect to a hotspot on your phone, it may actually be better than your cable modem or whatever else you have at home. But yeah, basically nationwide internet is choppy. A couple of my colleagues have actually had to pay more money to get faster connections, and I have a fast one already. Way ahead of that. But even mine, I've been noticing is a little bit more choppier than usual. Okay. Let me mention briefly how divorce works. Historically, only the husband could petition for divorce, right? That changed mostly in the middle of the 20th century. But even then, courts would only permit divorces in rare cases where there was abuse or neglect. And even then, it was very hard to get. The revolution came in the 1970s. The state of California instituted what's called no-fault divorce. Right? No fault, F-A-U-L-T, no-fault divorce. What does that mean? You don't need a reason to get divorced. You can get divorced for any reason or no reason at all. You always see celebrities, we separated for irreconcilable differences, right? You see this sort of phrase? What does that even mean? It means they just don't want to be together anymore. And the court is willing to grant these protections and just dissolve the marriage simply because they don't want to be together anymore. Most states have no-fault divorce, but with some modifications. So in some states, I think Texas has this regime, where if you file for divorce, you have to wait 90 days before you can actually get divorced. It's like a waiting period. The the thinking was that if you have some time to think about it, maybe you will change your mind and decide to come back together and give it another go. Does it work? I have no idea. A cooling off period, I suppose. In Virginia, where I went to law school, it's actually a 6-month waiting period or a 1-year waiting period. If the couple can reach an agreement on how to separate property, you can get divorced in 6 months. If it's contested, as you can't reach an agreement, you have to wait a year to file for divorce. During that year, you can't live together, right? Indeed, there are cases where a couple tries to get divorced, but they can't afford to move out, so they basically live in the same roof but in different bedrooms. And the courts say, well, you're not actually separated, so it doesn't count. So you have to do stuff to get divorced. You can't just sort of just wing it. I encourage all of you to take a class on marital property. I encourage you all to take a class on domestic relations. You all either know people get divorced or get divorced yourself. I'm looking at 78 faces, 34 of you, maybe, who knows, right? I can't count, right? But almost 39 of you will be there. Yeah, who knows? But it's a good topic to know, and such is life. Okay, any questions on that? I will ignore some of the comments in the chat right now. Not looking at those. By the way, family law is among the hardest areas of law to practice. I don't want to make light of it. You don't go to a family lawyer when things are good. You go when things are really bad, because it involves a marriage that dissolved. It involves custody for kids, and that stuff gets ugly real quick. Real quick, it gets ugly, and it's not pleasant. So it's hard work. A couple of my former students do it. It's not easy. Then you have abuse issues. Why are they getting divorced? Neglect. It's a rough area. Okay. One more point I'll lecture on briefly. There are different ways of dividing up property. Right? There are different ways of dividing up property. The older approach, right? The older approach was just called a division of property, right? Where you would simply divide it up based on, rigid numbers, right? The husband gets half and the wife gets half. The modern approach, which most states have, is called equitable distribution. Equitable distribution, right? With equitable distribution, courts consider equity. So maybe in a marriage, you shouldn't do it 50-50. Maybe one spouse was more responsible than the other. Maybe one spouse needs it more. With equitable distribution, courts have more flexibility to divide property up. As you can imagine, this is a lot less certain, and it gives judges a lot of discretion. Okay? I think, Texas has it for sure. I think almost every state has some form of equitable distribution, but at least we have it here in Texas. The basic concept, though, is that courts can only distribute marital property. Right? Again, if something is marital property, it can be distributed equitably. If it's outside the scope of marital property, it cannot be distributed. So again, the crux of this entire topic is what is and what is not marital property. That's the key question we'll be asking ourselves throughout this lesson. Okay? All right, any questions so far? All right, our first, I think our only case actually, but the first case I want to talk about today focuses on a question that is probably on your minds, right? What exactly is the value of the degree that I'm getting? How many of you, I thought about that recently when you were reading this case, yeah? It's like, what's my law degree worth? I'll just give you the numbers. the numbers I'm giving you are a couple years old, but they're probably still accurate. When you ask about what the value of a law degree is, you're asking what's the difference in earning potential between having a 4-year degree and going to law school for another 3 years to get a JD. The short answer is you increase your annual earnings about $50,000 a year. That's the average. Some a lot more, some a lot less. Indeed, there are some people who go to law school that don't become attorneys. They exist. Sometimes it's by choice. Sometimes they can't pass the bar. There's a number, but it increases your earnings each year by $50,000, and over a lifetime, about $1 million more. So you, by sitting here and learning property by this little iPhone app, right? You're getting about $1 million in your lifetime. It's mazel tov, right? That's why you're all here. But the question in this case is, what is the value of that degree for the spouse? Is a business degree considered marital property? Okay, I think Lexus, you're up next.
Yes, sir.
Okay, where are you? There you are. Okay.
Hi.
All right, thank you. Alexis, you want to give me the facts, please, in re marriage of Graham. And by the way, just the name of the case is so bizarre. In re, if you haven't seen that phrase, it means in regard to, about, more or less. So basically, this is a marriage that dissolved, and the court's resolving the property dispute. And this is at the state Supreme Court, so this must have been a very contentious issue. All right, Alexis, go ahead, please.
So the facts is that there's been a couple that's married for 6 years.
Good.
During that time, the wife was an airline stewardess, and she was working full time, and they said that she contributed to 70% of the household's income, while the husband worked part-time because he was in school getting his Bachelor of Science degree in Engineering, Physics, and a Master's in Business.
Good.
And then when they sought for divorce, she didn't seek alimony. The district court decided that his degrees were marital property, so they divided his future earnings that his degree would bring in.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Alexis. So first off, a steward, today we would say flight attendant, but at least in the 70s, you called it a stewardess. They made about $1,000 a month, about $20-something thousand a year for the top stewardess. This wasn't a very super high-paying professional. The husband worked part-time, but he also went to school the other parts of the time. Okay? Let's see, where am I? Tim, you here? Yeah, loud and clear. So, Tim, let me ask you a first question. What is alimony?
Payment from one spouse to the other for support.
Okay, how long does alimony last for?
I think I read 4 years somewhere. I don't know, however long the court decides.
Yeah, that's the right answer. Thanks, Tim. Alimony is payment from one spouse to the other. And historically, alimony was for the wife. I don't want to make it sexist, but that's what it was for. Think of it this way. If you had a husband who was working his entire career and the wife was a homemaker, as they would say, she had no business skills. She had never been in the work market. And it's often considered unfair to put a woman, say, in her 40s or 50s to go get a job for the first time. So alimony was designed as a way to support the spouse even after the divorce. Let's say a couple didn't have many assets, the wife would be left with nothing. Alimony is separate from child support. It's completely different. In fact, child support is in no way contingent on marital property. You'll study child support in your family law classes later, but our only focus here is on alimony. Okay? Giancarlo, you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Giancarlo, did the wife in this case apply for any sort of spousal support or alimony award?
She did not.
How come? It's an important point.
She wanted the MBA to be considered as property outright.
You're exactly right, but my question is different. Why did she not, or did she? Why did she or why didn't she seek alimony?
He did not seek alimony, which is one thing that the court pointed out because they compared it to Greer versus Greer. Because in Greer versus Greer, the trial court hinged their decision on that case but that case they did seek alimony.
But okay, so my question is why in this case, right? Why in this case did she not seek alimony? Why would a spouse not seek it?
I'm not 100% sure why she didn't.
Jasmine, you're next.
Hi.
Jasmine, why did the wife not seek spousal support in this case?
Maybe because I guess during the marriage she was the one that was supporting the husband, and she felt like that support was more important than, I guess, alimony.
Oh, no. Jasmine, let me try this a different way. Did she need spousal support?
No.
Why? She was employed, right? Was she allowed to seek spousal support at the time under law?
Yes.
No. Carson, you here?
Yes, sir.
Was she allowed to seek spousal support under the law at the time?
No, she was not.
How do we know that?
Because it stated it in the case.
Oh,
I think the
yeah.
dissent pointed it out.
Yeah. Always read the dissents. Yeah, what did the dissent say about that?
Well, I mean, they essentially just cited the statute for Colorado and said that.
Do you have a page number there?
Exactly. Do what?
Do you have a page number handy?
442 at the bottom, I think.
Okay, thanks, Carson. Yeah, and so just what did Colorado law allow spouses to seek alimony if they had jobs?
No, it essentially said that if you have a job and you're able to support yourself, then you don't have the right to seek alimony.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you, Carson. This is kind of a catch-22 for the wife. Colorado law was written in such a way that a working spouse could not seek alimony. Right? A husband who worked couldn't seek from a wife, and a wife who worked could not seek it from the husband. So she was stuck, right? The wife was stuck. The only way she can get anything out of the husband was through a division of assets, right? That's the only thing she can get. She could only get division of assets. She could not get alimony. So I think the majority was a little bit shady in saying, well, she could have applied for alimony. No, she couldn't have. Perhaps if she quit her job, she could have gotten it, but under her current situation, she couldn't. Let's see who's next. Nancy, you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Nancy, you hear us loud and clear? Very good. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, Nancy, let me ask you this question, please. What do you think the wife was probably thinking all those years when she was, working as a flight attendant and her husband was going for school? What do you think she probably expected was going to happen?
Give and take. When he was done and making more money, then, it contributes to their marital property together. They have more income together as a married couple.
Right. So
it benefits them both in the end.
Yeah. So Nancy, what do you think the wife viewed her working, all these hours? What did she think she was going to get out of it?
I thought she was investing in their future lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the word you use, Nancy, investment. This is common. I think this is common. The dissent said it's all too common where it's the wife putting the husband through school as an investment. Now, I don't want you to raise your hands, but when I was in law school, this was fairly common. There were a number of married students who were going to class full time, and their wives or husbands worked, and they supported them while they were going through school. And of those, a bunch of them were divorced either when law school finished or shortly after law school finished. Now, perhaps law school is a stressor and it creates relationship strains. That's also possible. But in a lot of these cases, the spouse thought they were making an investment. They didn't bear the fruits of that investment. And in all these cases, right? The spouse says, well, I paid her tuition. I paid his tuition. I paid for his books. The answer is too bad, because you were doing this out of love, and then love fell apart. Breakups are sad, and you get nothing. And the reason, I won't say the reason why, but a lot of the students would get divorced upon graduation before they worked for a law firm. That way there'll be less money to divide up. So 3L divorces were quite common. I don't want to scare you, but it happens. It happens. Perversely, a lot of students who came to law school married left single. And it's true. And a lot of students who met law school leave married. Trust me, from this section, there'll probably be a couple married couples. It happens. And it's not even people who date in law school. It's like people who graduated and then got married like a year or two later. It's a damn thing. It's like they weren't even friends. You didn't even know it. Lexi asked about Wendy Davis. Oh, I wasn't going to mention that, but now I will. You might remember Wendy Davis. She ran for governor of the state a couple of years ago. I think she's running for Congress now in Austin. She went to Harvard Law School while her husband and kids were still in Texas. And she graduated, and her husband was making a lot of money, and he paid off all of her student loans. And the story goes she filed for divorce after the last payment was made. I mean, there maybe were other reasons why she filed for divorce then, but her husband, who supported her campaign, said, yeah, she divorced me after I paid off her loans. So, yeah. Yeah, Wendy Davis. Let's see, someone else chat. Chance asks, in a divorce was coming up 6 months out, could you quit being an airline employee so you can sue and claim alimony? Okay, so Chance asks a question. Could a person quit her job to simply apply for alimony? Well, yeah, Chance, but she has to stay unemployed, right? Once she gets her job back, she's no longer eligible. Right? Alimony can be reconsidered as situations change. I don't think that would be smart. But I'm telling you, my friends, it happens all the time where people get divorced right before they're about to get a lot of money. Like before they become partner at a firm, they get divorced, right? It happens. So, it's not good or bad, but that's just the world we live in. Okay. All right, so questions so far. All right, I think, Ryan, you're up next.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ryan, let's start with the trial court. Where are you? Ryan. Did you take yourself mute?
Yes.
There you go. Okay. There you go. I see you now. Okay. All right, Ryan. So I want you to explain to me, what did the trial court do in this case?
The trial court ruled that the degree was marital property and could be transferred.
Okay. So why did the trial court think the degree was marital property?
The trial court, for probably the reasons that we were citing earlier, saying that the ruling would have been unfair otherwise, that it was an investment, that her spending, I think it was 70% of the contributing 70% of the financial support should have been compensation for receiving the funds.
Okay. Well, let me ask one more question, Ryan. What is the argument about earning power, right? Was this about the fact that the wife increased the husband's earning power?
Well, in some ways, yes, for the investment respect, but or at least the Supreme Court ended up saying that something along the lines of exchangeability, whether you can exchange power or or transferring, if you were to take the degree off the wall and hand it to her, if there would be any value to that.
Yeah.
And they simply concluded that it didn't. There's no value in her having that in her hands. There's some things that just aren't exchangeable.
Right, that's the appellate court. Hold on. Cassidy actually has a good point. Cassidy, do you want to jump in here for a second? I think you made a point I'd like you to speak out loud so people don't have to read a long chat. Are you here? Oh, Cassidy, you're on mute. I'm so sorry. Yeah, just start from the beginning. I'm so sorry.
Okay, sorry. Well,
I think that you can't just like suddenly become like unemployed, and then 6 months out get a divorce. So you can't like quit your job in anticipation of a divorce, because your spousal support is likely going to be determined according to your earning capacity.
Yeah.
And not as opposed to what you're presently earning. So like a flight attendant, would, if she quit her job, the spousal support would be determined as if she would assuming that she was still making the money that she was as a flight attendant. Or I think that my other point was actually a better illustration. Like, say you're working as a lawyer and you're like, hey, I'm gonna get a divorce, but I don't want to have my spousal support determined as if I were an attorney. I'm going to quit being an attorney now, and then I'm going to be a street performer, and I want my spousal support, determined as if I was a street performer. It's going to be determined according to your capacity and not according to what you're presently doing.
Very good. Thank you, Cassidy. And let me make the point a little differently. We discussed in the last class the concept of fraudulent conveyance. Fraudulent conveyance. Remember the husband and wife transfer their property to their kids to avoid giving up in a tort suit. Remember that? It's the same idea with marital property. Let's say a husband has all this property and he wants to hide it from his wife, and he sells it to his buddy for $1, right? With the understanding that when this entire divorce is over, the buddy sells it back to him for $1. The court can actually say, no. That's a fraudulent transfer of property, fraudulent conveyance, and they basically nullify the transfer, so it's still considered marital property. So I think Cassie's point well taken. If you try and play the courts and try and shield or hide your assets, and the other spouse finds out about it, you get burned. And in terms of equity, it looks really bad when you're trying to hide stuff so it can't get divvied up. It happens, people said, oh, I'm getting divorced, let me just spend all of my money, right? Or even the worst one, we'll do one next week, where a guy buys his mistress all these presents with marital money, right? He buys his mistress all these lavish gifts. And the court says, well, that was marital property. You have to now basically take it away from the mistress, and give it to the wife. This happened a lot. If you remember the Los Angeles Clippers, the owner was a guy named Don Sterling, who had girlfriends in California. And he bought her all these really expensive gifts. Her name was V. Stiviano. If that name rings a bell. And the courts actually held that those were marital property and has to go back to the wife. Tony, do you want to add something? If you want to jump in here?
Yeah, during my divorce, we literally had to go down to the penny on all of our accounts, joint or unjoint, any debt we had, any credit we had, and everything like that. And then the judge looked at that and determined who was getting what percentage of all of the marital property that we had.
It wasn't.
I got divorced in Colorado.
It wasn't 50-50, was it?
It was not 50-50.
No, it's not like that anymore.
No.
Yeah. All right. Well, I won't ask your number, but I appreciate you volunteering. It's always sensitive. I don't like calling on people because it's such a personal issue, but it is.
Oh, you're fine. It was 80-20 pretty much, and I got the 20.
Yeah. Do you remember we did the rule of Shelley's case in property? I told you don't need to know it. When I was in law school, we had a professor who made a joke. He was a judge in Virginia. He said, in Virginia, we follow the rule in Mary's case, where the woman gets everything, and that was basically the rule. The other one was in a custody dispute, you follow the rule in Mary's case, the woman gets the kids. That was basically the rule. Anyway, but it's never going to be 50-50 in any jurisdiction. It doesn't work like that anymore. Okay. All right. Okay. So who am I up to now? Douglas Wall, you're on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So Douglas, let's talk about math for a minute. Lawyers hate math, right? You didn't go to law school for math because if you knew math, you'd be in med school, right? Or something else. It's a lot harder. The trial court here, I think, also was not very good with numbers. Can you try to at least explain to me how the trial court came up with his calculations? It's a little complicated, I agree. How how did the trial judge come up with a number here? He came up with a number. He gave her an award, but how did he come up with it?
It was based on future earning power, I believe.
No. I want specifics, right?
Oh.
Yeah. How did he calculate? Well, let's start at the end game, right, Douglas? What did the husband have to pay the wife? What was the award that the trial court gave?
The award ended up being $33,000.
Okay, spread out over how much time?
Monthly installments of $100.
So basically, right. So $100, right, spread out over 330 months, which is about 27 years. Okay. So Doug, how did the judge come up with that number of $33,000?
He based it off of the future earnings of what the husband was going to make.
Right. And then what was the future earnings of the MBA degree? What was that amount?
It was $14,000 per year.
Uh-huh. And what did that add out to over the course of a career?
$82,836.
Okay, Doug. So we have $83,000, right? What percentage of that $80,000 does the wife get?
That seems like a third.
He gave,
less than a third.
well, he gave her 40%, close enough, right? How did he come up with this 40% number? This is, I think, one of the funniest parts of the case. How did the judge come up with the 40% number?
I do not know.
I think Jordan, you're next. You have it, Jordan?
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. How did the judge come up with that 40% number?
I honestly wasn't sure. I expected it to have something to do with the 70% of what she provided, but it doesn't seem to have.
Well, Jordan, let me ask you this question. How many hours a week was the wife working?
Full time, so normally 40 hours a week.
Okay, so the wife was working 40 hours a week. How many hours a week was the husband studying?
I'm not exactly
Look
sure.
at the footnote. Always read the footnotes, my friend. On 439. Thank you,
So
Ricardo.
he-
I hear a kitty.
Yes. So he studied 40 hours a week and then worked 20 hours a week.
And how much did the wife work?
40 hours a week.
Okay, so what happens when you add up 40 plus 20 plus 40?
100.
100. And what percentage of that was the wife working?
40% of that.
Yeah. I think Nick just put the answer in the chat, right? This is insane. This is like garbage math. I don't even know where the hell the judge came up with this, right? But basically he said, well, there was a total of 100 hours a week being worked, and the wife was working 40. The husband was working 40, sorry, studying 40, but working 20, so that's 100 hours. Therefore, I'll give the wife 40%. What the hell is that? That's completely arbitrary, right? I teach this case every year. And I'm like, where did the judge come up with this? But it's basically almost half, right? It's basically not quite 50%, but 40%, right? It's almost half the value of the degree. And then you chop it up over the course of 30 years and give the husband pays $100 a month. Everyone at least get the math. I think Nick typed it out in the chat window. I think Nick's math looks right to me. By the way, always read the footnotes. I think I mentioned this, but apparently in the bar exam, when they do the MPT, the performance component, they'll give you a packet of materials to read. And there's going to be stuff in footnotes. And apparently our South Texas students do not read those footnotes, and they miss crap and they get stuff wrong. So always read the footnotes. All right. So that was the trial court decision. The Court of Appeals affirms, and it goes to the Supreme Court of the state. Megan, are you here? Oh, we have a lot of W names. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have like 9 W's. I've never had that many. Wow. I never look at your last names. Megan, I think you're next.
Yes.
So Megan, walk me through, please, the Colorado Supreme Court's analysis of why of why this is not marital property, why the business degree is not marital property.
Because even in the broadest views of what property is, there's no exchange value or objective transferable value on an open market for a degree.
Yeah.
So it can't be considered property.
Okay, very good. By the way, I want to mention this point. I'm sorry, I'm on mute. I want to mention that. Very good, Megan. I want to mention this point briefly. The case refers to the Uniform Dissolution of Marriage Act at the very beginning, and just pull that up in your notes. It basically says everything is marital property except, right? Except, and the first one it lists is, was it a gift or acquired by bequest, devise, or descent? That means inheritance. So at least in Colorado, I think someone asked me earlier, at least in Colorado under the uniform rule, inheritances are not considered marital property. What else is not marital property? Stuff you got before the marriage. Okay, Garrett, yes, in Texas too, inheritances are not marital property. That's correct. What happens, let's say you buy a car before marriage, right? And you swap that car for another car, right? If it's something exchanged for property before the marriage, it's not marital property. What happens if you get legally separated, right? Stuff acquired after legal separation is not marital property. But you say, wait a minute, Josh, if you're divorced, you know, who cares? The way it usually works is you get a legal divorce, and maybe Tony can chime in, and then the custody and property disputes come later, right? You can sometimes have your legal separation, Tony, you're nodding your head, and then at some point later you finally divvy up the assets. Am I describing that correctly?
Yeah, it took us almost 17 or 18 months to finalize the assets.
After you were separated legally.
After we've been separated legally.
Yeah, so stuff you acquire after legal separation, I think, at least in Colorado, I don't think it does, right? It doesn't count, right?
Yeah, it doesn't count.
Oh, you're from Colorado. That's where this case is from. So I guess this one hit home close to you.
Yes, brought back great memories.
Oh boy. All right, I'm gonna move on. Thanks, Tony. So stuff acquired afterwards, but generally, most things are marital property. And the court gives some arguments which maybe you find persuasive or not. So, for example, a business degree, right? It has no intrinsic value, right? That beautiful scrap of paper hanging on your wall is not worth much. I remember about 10 years ago, someone put his JD on Craigslist and was selling it for a few dollars. It was mostly like a political statement, but he was trying to make a point. This paper is worthless, and no one would want to buy it. You can buy fake diplomas online. They sell them on eBay. Those are available for purchase, but I would not recommend it because merely having that piece of paper does not give you anything, right? You can't buy someone's JD and go sit for the bar. It does not work like that. The court also says that the degree was based on his hard work and his diligence. And, if the wife wants to support him, that was her choice. And she cannot then later acquire any compensation for it. Okay. Questions on that much? John, I think you're up next. A lot of W's. I've never had this many W's before. John, what does the court say about alimony? Where does alimony fit into this discussion, John?
She doesn't qualify for alimony.
Well, right, you're right. She does in this case, but as a general matter, forget this case in particular. As a general matter, how does alimony fit into the fact that his earning capacity was increased? Where does alimony fit in?
Well, it's expected that the spouses support each other, and
John, when the judges are calculating alimony, can they consider earning potential?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Well, because during the course of the marriage, I keep going back to this case, but in the course of this marriage, his earning potential was increased they also look at it to try to maintain the level of the quality of living that is enjoyed by one or.
Well, but at this point, John, had he had a job yet? Had he raised the quality of his wife's life yet?
No, sir.
But then, what? How can the courts consider earning potential for alimony? What does that look like? Right, it's not based on how she was living her life before. What's it based on?
To what she's going to live her life afterwards.
Had they stayed married?
Had they stayed married?
That's it.
Yes.
Okay, I just finishing up for you, right? When you're calculating the alimony or the spousal support, you consider not only the standard to which she's become accustomed to, you also consider the standard that she would become accustomed to had they stayed married. Keep in mind, my friends, at this point, they were broke college students. They had no property. I don't think they had a house. They didn't have a car. There's really nothing to divide up. Everything was in that business degree. So the court says, well, we will not consider the business degree as marital property, but you can consider the business degree for the future awards. Now, Nicole, you here? Or Nikki, right?
Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. Nikki, what do you think the trial judge was trying to do here? Right? What do you think the trial judge was trying to do here with this $100 award? What do you think he was basically trying to do?
I think he was trying to compensate her over the next 27 years, or prospectively probably how long they would have lived.
Could he give her an award of alimony and called alimony, Nikki?
He couldn't because she didn't need spousal support.
So what did he do instead? What do you think he just?
Instead, he basically gave him like a mandatory settlement.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you, Nikki. I think what the trial judge was doing was said, well, this isn't fair. She deserves alimony. I can't give it to her. Let me just make up this crazy math to give her the same thing I was giving her anyway. Right? In other words, I think the judge wanted to give her $100 a month for alimony. He couldn't call it alimony. He said, aha, I'll do this convoluted math and come up with this 40% of 100, whatever that number was, right? That's how he gave the award. So I think that's what the trial judge was doing. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. That was abuse of discretion. In Colorado, the degree itself is not marital property. I'll get to the dissent in a minute. Are there any questions? Jayla, yes, I see your hand. I see your virtual hand at least. Yes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right, perfect. So I guess it's just lost upon me as to, it just doesn't make any sense that they would even end up in court trying to divide up like the degree. Like that doesn't make any sense. Like how they ended up in court saying like, the way I guess I interpreted it was she was saying I'm entitled to have his earnings because this is not his degree, this is our degree.
Right. Well, Jayla, put yourself in the shoes of the wife for a minute, right? She just put her husband through college and he dumped her right after he graduated. Right? What do you think she wanted? What do you think she wanted out of this? Why do you think she put this case all the way to the state Supreme Court?
I guess at the very least, she should really just be asking for like, I guess I would expect her to ask for the money back that she may have like contributed to his education versus saying like, he owes me his future earnings. Like, you're not entitled to that, but if you helped finance his education, I think that's what she should. That's why it doesn't make sense to me.
So, Jayla, would you ask for the tuition money they spent? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
What about the food she gave him and the clothes she paid for? That stuff too?
But they're married. So to me, that kind of falls under like, well, isn't that the benefit of a marriage? Isn't that what married people do? They do things for each other. So if that's the case, then are we supposed to start nickel and diming every single thing that married people do for each other in a marriage? Like, that's out of control, in my opinion.
So you think she could ask for tuition, but not like the food she gave him?
Right, because whether he was in school or not, they were going to need to eat.
Okay, so Jayla, one more follow-up. How much do you think tuition was back then in Colorado? It's in the 70s.
70s?
Not very much.
Way less than what it is now.
Yeah, and it was also in-state tuition too, right? It was at a state school. So I think the short answer is the tuition would have been a hell of a lot less than the $80,000. and she wanted more. The second answer is it wasn't clear she could recover for the tuition. You say that paying for your husband's food and clothes is part of marriage. I think paying for your husband's expenses is just the same. And I think the court would say she voluntarily paid his tuition, right? She voluntarily paid tuition. Doug asked, does the $100 adjust with inflation? Not automatically. You have to go back to court and request an adjustment, which is why these spousal awards. I mentioned Wendy Davis, and I mentioned Elizabeth Warren also. She lived in Houston actually. She was a professor at University of Houston, and she was married here briefly, and she got divorced. In Liz Warren's separation decree, she actually put an inflation variable that whatever spousal award would increase each year after year. So spouses can't put that into a decree. Cassidy, you shared a document. It's pretty blurry. Is that your divorce decree, if I'm looking at that right? I think you're on mute. You're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
You don't have to look at that right now, but it's really great if you guys get a chance. It's a lazy attorney, and what happens, it came out in my favor. I don't think I can actually collect on it, but essentially it says that I'm entitled to everything that he ever had, has, or will ever have. So I actually, on paper, it says that I'm entitled to future earnings. That's all. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I pulled up. It's quite blurry, but I do appreciate you shared it.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
That's
sorry.
okay.
I wanted this in a small file.
That's okay. And Tony says people get very petty when divorce is involved. Unfortunately, that's true. Jayla says it doesn't make sense. Look, when people get divorced, people get really petty. That's a good word to use. That's the word Tony used. And you might say, well, can't reasonable people agree? After divorce, it gets pretty scorched earth very quickly. It might start off amicably, and they don't always end amicably. So you're laughing, Jayla. It's true, but I see people smiling and pointing at the screen, and nodding quietly. I see lots of shaking of heads right now. It's painful, right? It's painful. People.
Isn't that why they get the courts involved, though? So the court can kind of level the playing field.
Yeah.
Most people get petty.
Yeah. By the time it gets to the courts, though, then the lawyers are involved, and when the lawyers get involved, it often gets even worse because the lawyers make it more adversarial, right? The reason why, couples can get divorced without attorneys, but once communications break down, that's when the lawyers come in, and that usually at that point, Nancy writes, once courts are involved, it's all out war. I'll take her word for it. And Tony is giving me, yes, he agrees. Caitlin asked, how does this affect prenup? So I'll mention prenup later, but I'll talk to them briefly now. A prenuptial agreement, right? Nuptials means marriage. Pre means before, right? So prenuptial agreement means an agreement before marriage. Prenups in general describe how property should be distributed in the event of a divorce. The short answer is prenups aren't always great in hindsight, right? Because things happen, they don't anticipate. Maybe when the couple gets married, they're poor, then they get really wealthy, they have kids. So often prenups aren't always very enforceable. Nicole says prenups do not need consideration. That's right, they're not actually contracts, right? You can't actually, it's not governed by the UCC. It's not actually a binding contract. Like you can't sue someone for breaching, right, a marriage. Right? If you decide to get divorced, you get divorced. There was a famous, if you remember, Jackie Kennedy was married to Aristotle Onassis. There was a famous, apparently, a clause in their prenup that I think they said they had to have sex a certain number of times a month or something, right? Google it. It's called an Onassis clause, apparently. I don't think it's enforceable, right? You can't get specific performance. I'm going to move on. Quinn writes, Clayton writes, congratulations, definitely got married over spring break. Yeah, mazel tov. It was the last weddings for a while. Hope we have no honeymoons. Divorce, Nancy writes, divorce can be done in cooperation. You have to ask the court to enter the order, right? If you have a non-contested divorce, then the court just enter the order and there's not a problem. Okay. Other questions? All right. I think Cameron, I got quarantined the first day of my honeymoon. Oh, Congratulations, Nicole. I'm sorry. I think, Cameron, you're next. You want to turn your mic on, please? Oh, we have 2 marriages over the break. Wow, look at that. Cameron, you here? I don't see Cameron. Chase, you're up here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. All right, Chase, let me ask you a question. What did the dissent say? What was the dissent's argument?
So the dissent criticized the fact that the majority focused on whether or not it was property, and instead they should have focused on the fact that the husband had the power to make more money in the future.
Right.
It could be more equitable.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. The dissent's like, let's be real here, right? Let's focus on economic reality. It's all too common where the wife supports the husband and the husband pieces out when he gets his degree. Under Colorado law, spousal support's not allowed, so we should allow the wife to divide this up. Okay. All right. Questions on the Colorado case? All right. Elias, you here?
Yes.
All right. What's the rule in New Jersey? Always New Jersey, right? New Jersey giving us a different rule than everyone else.
In regards to what exactly?
The value of professional degrees. It's in the notes.
That the court shall consider the direct or indirect contributions to the development during the marriage of the enhanced earning capacity.
So just in New Jersey, Elias, can the court consider future earning potential as marital property?
Yes.
What did you just read? That's not what you just said.
Well, they keep talking about how it's a factor that can be considered in regards to, like maintenance.
What can you recover in New Jersey specifically? This is more or less Jayla's question for a few minutes ago.
Enhanced earning capacity.
No. No, in New Jersey, you can get back the contributions you made towards the degree. So, for example, education costs, school travel costs, tuition, etc. Right? They don't value the future earnings. But in other words, you let the wife get back what she put in. This is more or less what Jayla asked before. Right? So if there's specific costs that went towards acquiring the degree in Jersey, you can get it back. In New York, the law was different. In New York, the degree was marital property, and that the medical license, for example, could be considered marital property. That was a law until a couple of years ago in 2016, where New York repealed or basically overruled that case, where they said you can't treat the license as marital property, but when you have equitable distribution of property, you can consider it as a factor. So it's sort of a weird thing in New York where you can, to some degree, consider the value of the degree. Now, those are the outlier cases. Questions on those? I'll mention another one that's kind of messed up. This was a Texas case where there was a guy who was in prison for 24 years for a crime he didn't commit. He was married when he went in, but he got divorced while he was in jail. Eventually, a DNA test cleared him, right? It wasn't him. He was wrongly accused. And the state awarded him $2 million for wrongly incarcerating him for almost, 24 years. His ex-wife came around and said, I would like a cut of that $2 million. And the guy said, no, I earned that money after we were divorced. And the wife says, no, that's not right. You accumulated that money during the time we were married. And I came and I visited you and I helped pay for your lawyers and I put money into your commissary account. And the husband says, well, you rarely visited me. And in fact, the husband said, I divorced you because you grew so distant. So was the award of the $2 million considered marital property? The Court of Appeals in Dallas said, no, it was not. He earned that himself. It was basically like lost wages for things that he did, and it was not community property. Not the example you think of, but it's there. All right. There are a couple questions. The New York and the New Jersey rule are minorities. New York and New Jersey are not the majority rule, the minority rules. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Questions on that? Okay. The book discusses the concept of dower and courtesy. Don't worry about it. They've been abolished in all states. I don't know why it's in the book, but I just have it for you there briefly. I will not test you on it. I don't care. But these are these old things used to provide some compensation. I'll move on to things that you actually did learn. What you do have to know, Sarah asked, would you like us to use the reasoning on paragraph 4 of page 440? Hold on, let me bring up my book. Paragraph 4 on page 440. Yeah, I think that's the majority rule, Sarah. I think that's right. That's from the where the court says an educational degree is not marital property. I think that's correct. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. Where was I? Okay. What you do need to know, though, is what's called the elective share. This is the last thing I want to talk about today. The modern elective share. Okay? What is the modern elective share? Here's where it kicks in. In a normal, happy marriage, where a husband writes a will, he will usually leave his wife at least half of his assets. Maybe more, but at least half. Not all marriages are happy. And very often you have a husband or a wife who's a jerk, or maybe justified, and decides to leave his spouse out of his will. He leaves his spouse out of his will, leaves his spouse nothing. Now the wife may think, oh man, once my husband dies, we get all this money, it's going to be awesome, right? No. As soon as the death happens, they look at the will, it's like, oh crap, he wrote me out, he left everything to his girlfriend. It happens. The modern elective share prevents that from happening, right? What elective share means is that the surviving spouse can elect or choose to opt out of the will, right? With the modern elective share, you can opt out of the will and instead choose what the law allows, which is usually about half, right? If there are no kids, the wife can go half. And if there are kids, the wife takes maybe a third. It varies from state to state, but it's usually half and a third. Okay. Alan, no, don't worry about dower and courtesy. This next thing I'm going to say is very important. The modern elective share does not exist in Texas. It does not exist in community property states. So Texas, California, there's no modern elective share. Why? In Texas, you can't cut your wife out of the will because of community property. It's not possible. But in New York, you can cut your wife out of the will. In New Jersey, Pennsylvania, you can. So if I give you an exam and I say you're in Texas, don't talk about the elective share. If I give you an exam, I say you're in New York, you can talk about it. The complication is, let's say a couple moves from Texas to New York, right? And the couple, the husband dies in New York, the wife can take the elective share. But if the couple moves from New York to Texas and the husband dies in Texas, the wife cannot take the elective share. Indeed, a lot of couples who move to Texas to retire in Austin don't realize how this screws up their wills. And a lot of people can get screwed this way. So just keep that in mind. I have a lot of exam questions where people move around from state to state. Okay? All right. Go to 447. Chance asks, is it died or moves? If someone dies at MD Anderson. Generally, your domicile is set based on a lot of factors, and your will is probated where you're domiciled. So I don't think just going to a hospital would give you sufficient connections to have domicile there. You'd have to actually establish roots. Go to 447, everyone, please. Corey, I think you're next.
Yeah.
All right, you want to read the problem for me, please?
H dies in a state that gives the surviving spouse an elective share of one half of the decedent's property, passing by will or intestacy. During his life, H took out a life insurance policy in the face amount of $60,000 payable to W. H and W also bought a house worth $60,000 at H's death and took title as joint tenants. H dies owning Blackacre worth $90,000, stocks and bonds worth $20,000, and a $10,000 savings account.
Good.
H well bequeaths all of his estate to his daughter by first marriage. D.
Good.
How is H and K distributed?
All right, Corey, let's go one line at a time, right? The life insurance policy for $60,000 was payable to the wife. How was that $60,000 divided up?
Would she get half of it or all of it?
Which one is it? You gave me two answers. Which one is it?
Half of it? I'm not sure.
No. If I have a life insurance policy for someone, right?
Yeah.
Is that property that exists during life?
No.
Is a life insurance policy marital property?
No.
Okay, so in this case, it doesn't pay out until
He dies.
So how much does the wife get from the insurance policy?
All of it?
Yeah, all of it. Let me just, Corey, thank you, and Michael, you're on deck. This often comes up with insurance policies. If he had left the $60,000 policy to his daughter, the wife would get none of it, right? The wife would get none of it. The only reason why the wife gets it was because her name was on the policy. All right, Michael, you here? I think you're on mute. This is Michael's camera right now. I don't see him. I see a ceiling. Okay. Back up to the top of the list. Ricardo. You here? Yes?
I'm here.
Okay, Ricardo. So the next one, it says, husband and wife bought a house worth $60,000. And they had it as joint tenants. What happens at husband's death?
She would get all of it.
All of what?
The $60,000 of the house or the house,
Yeah. Why does she get it?
because they're joint tenants.
And what's the key defining feature of a joint tenancy? What happens when one of the tenants dies?
Survivorship.
Exactly. All right. So again, the wife has protection there, right? Because she's a joint tenant, she gets survivorship rights, and she gets house and fee simple. All right, Troy, I think you're next. You here, Troy? Nope. Doug?
I'm here.
All right, so Doug, what happens to his stock, his bonds, and savings account worth was $130,000, give or take? 120. I'm sorry, 120. I can't count. 120,000. What happens to that? He gave it all to his daughter. What happens to that stuff?
It would go all to his daughter.
Does his wife get none of it?
Well, it's not owned jointly by them.
What happens, Doug? What happens if the husband basically tries to write his wife out of his will? What can the wife do?
Oh, she can use the modern elective share.
Yes.
Is she in that state though? I don't have the problem in front of me.
It's in the book. It's used there. Yeah. So if she takes the modern elective share, what does the wife get?
She gets whatever the amount is allowed by law, but it could be like a half.
That's right. She gets half. So the wife would take half of that stock and bonds, right? The wife gets 60 grand. So you see what happens here, right? Even though the husband tried to screw the wife over, she had her joint tenancy with survivorship rights, and she has elective share, and she gets a life insurance policy. But had the husband directed the life insurance policy to the daughter, the wife would get none of that, right? You direct the life insurance policy wherever you want. So if you're a crafty planner, you can exclude spouses in that fashion. Okay. Questions on that problem? All right. Let me wrap up. I think Haley, you're on deck for the start of our. Or sorry, Anthony, Tony, you're on deck next class also. More divorce stuff, right? Diana asked only for life insurance. Well, generally, life insurance policies are unique because they're paid out after death, right? It's not something that was ever marital property. But the stocks and bonds would be something she take the elective share for Diana. Can you direct life insurance to several people or just one? Oh, you can direct it however many you want. You can say 50% to this person, 25% to another person. You can chop it up. Chance asked, had the last part been owned by the husband prior to marriage? Would it be considered marital property? If those were stocks that he acquired before the marriage, they're not marital property. Okay, thank you. All right, let me wrap up a little bit and let you out of here right on time. Also, I will end the session right around 3:30, and I'll come back in a minute later. If you have office hours, just waiting room one at a time. So the challenge with the topic we have now is deciding what is and is not marital property. It's a broad definition, and if you have to guess, just guess it is marital property, you're probably right. Except in virtually every state, degrees are not considered marital property. And once you decide what the marital property is, the state ensures that spouses are protected. That could be through equitable distribution, that could be through an award of alimony, and it could also be through the elective share in the event of a death as well. All right, any questions? No more? All right, I will end this meeting. I'll come right back in and hope to see you in office hours in a bit. Thanks.